Hello, good morning. Welcome to this week's episode of Learn with Lorna, episode number 228, where we'll be looking at the subject of football memories. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. We have 4 archive centres in Inverness, Port William, Portree and Wick, where we look after documents relating to the Highlands of Scotland, dating back as far as the 1200s and all the way up to the present day. This series is brought to you by Highland at no cost to the viewer. Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're really grateful for that. And I know that over the years that this series has been running, the 5 years that the series has been running, many of you have done that, and it really makes such a difference to our work. So thank you so much for doing that. So welcome to this week's episode. This week's episode is pre-recorded as I'm on annual leave, and next week's will also be pre-recorded as I'm down in Newtonmore at the Highland Folk Museum giving a talk there. So 2 weeks of pre-recorded episodes. This week's episode, Football Memories, is scheduled in for this year's programme to coincide with the 10th anniversary of Inverness Caledonian Thistle winning the 130th Scottish Cup in 2015. And for this episode, I am greatly indebted to my colleague, Jamie Gockrodger, Ambala Coordinator, because this is really an Ambala story, as will become apparent as we go on. For anyone who doesn't know what I mean when I say Ambala, Ambala is our Highland History and Culture website. It currently includes over 30,000 images, videos, audio clips from across the Highlands and Islands. If you are not familiar with Ambala, then I would suggest, if you want to find out more, to check out Learn with Lorna episode 96, which tells the story of Ambala, how it came about and what it involves now. So I'm going to start with an overview of the Football Memories project written by Jamie. The Inverness Football Memories project officially launched in May 2022, led by Inverness Caledonian Thistle Community Trust in partnership with Clachnacudden FC and Highland, particularly through its Ambala website, but also with input from the Highland Archive Centre, Inverness Library and Inverness Museum and Art Gallery. The aim of the project is to preserve and celebrate the rich history of association football in Inverness, from its origins in the 1880s right up to the present day, covering clubs like Citadel, Inverness Thistle, Caledonian, Clachnacudden and later Inverness Caledonian Thistle. The project is split into various different sections, which I'll touch on a wee bit later on, but I wanted to first of all mention one of those, memory sessions. There are monthly memories sessions at the Caledonian Stadium where mostly older fans who stood on the terraces from the 1950s onwards share reminiscences and swap stories over a cup of tea, sparking recollections that lead to lively conversations. Leafing through a faded programme from the 1960s or spotting a familiar face in a team lineup can trigger recollections that might otherwise lie dormant. Conversations flow about goals scored, famous wins, bitter defeats, and even the journey to and from the ground on match day. In some ways, it's a reunion of old friends. As one participant put it, it's not just about remembering the matches, it's about remembering the people we went with, the friends we met, and the lives we lived. For participants, these sessions can be therapeutic. Memory work like this is known to have benefits for people living with dementia, but it's also a way to combat social isolation. Football becomes the common language, a shared backdrop that connects different generations and life experiences. It's not just about football, it's about belonging. The game provides a starting point for helping people to feel connected again. So this is a partnership project between Highland and Inverness's football clubs, and it's been a huge success and a really meaningful project for us to be involved in. But before I come back to share the things that have come from this project, I mentioned there in Jamie's extract that one of this project's aims is to celebrate the rich history of Inverness's football clubs. So I'm going to do that first of all. And I will be focusing mostly on the men's game, although I will talk about the women's game towards the end. I'm going to be sharing here extracts provided not only by Jamie at Ambala, but also by others who have been heavily involved in the Football Memories project, including Gordon Fife, Chairman of the Inverness Caledonian Thistle Community Trust, and Charles Bannerman local journalist and historian. But I'm going to start with Andrew Beaton's The Early History of Football in Inverness. Andrew Beaton notes that football came relatively late to Inverness and that much of the credit for its introduction can go to the army. He says, "The 79th Cameron Highlanders held exhibition matches for the public at Milburn Barracks, and by 1884 at least one other local team, Crown FC, appears to have adopted the new game. Like countless other teams throughout Britain, Crown had hitherto played rugby, but were by then in the process of converting to the new dribbling code we now know as football. Both Crown and the Camerons would go on to become leading sides in local football competitions, the latter going on to join the Highland League. On the 7th of March 1885, the first formally organised football match in Inverness took place at the Northern Meeting Park, where Crown FC hosted Nairn County FC in a 1-1 draw. The match appears to have attracted a reasonably large crowd, and reports credit the home team with a spirited performance against more experienced opposition, Nairn having been playing the game for slightly longer. Crown continued to play rugby rules as well as association for at least a while afterwards. It's difficult to say with certainty when other local clubs were formed. However, Caledonian, Inverness Thistle and Clachnacudden all trace their foundations to 1885-1886. At least one of them, Clach, was still playing rugby in 1886, although they may also have been playing association as well. The mid-1880s in Inverness and elsewhere in the north was a period of transition in the sport, which saw the new game gradually oust the longer established rugby in terms of popularity. Ross County FC did not make the change until 1887, when the first football match in Dingwall took place against a newly formed Inverness club, Northern Counties FC. What would become another leading club, Inverness Union FC, was formed in 1886 when members of Ballafairy FC voted to change their name in the hope of attracting new players from outside the locality. The Inverness Charity Cup competition was inaugurated in 1885 with the objective of raising funds for local good causes from gate money at matches. First won by Crown, the competition continued until the season 1950-51. The North of Scotland Cup, still competed for today, was introduced in 1888 and the Inverness Junior Cup in 1887. These, along with other cup competitions, appear to have inspired a surge in interest in the game within the town and the surrounding area. By 1890, with a population of around 21,000, Inverness had more than 30 football teams, from senior to schoolboy level. A few had up to 3 squads each. Some will doubtless have disbanded after a brief existence, while a few others remain familiar names today, as well as in the recent history of Inverness. In the surrounding area during the 1880s and 1890s, teams were also to be found in Bewley, Muirvord, Fortrose and Cromarty. Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? More than 30 clubs within Inverness, some with multiple squads. Andrew Beaton goes on in that article to say that such was the growth of interest in the game that the newly formed North of Scotland FA arranged for more experienced teams from the south to visit, both to improve the standards but also to promote the game. Glasgow Rangers were the first to come in 1888, playing an Inverness select side and attracting a crowd of around 4,000. They would be followed by Celtic, by Aberdeen, St Johnstone, Hearts and others including Sunderland, who were the first English team to play in Inverness. And the popularity of football in the Highlands and the number of clubs led on the 4th of August 1893 to the formation of the Highland League. Thistle, who played at Kingsmills, Caledonian, who played at Telford Street, Union in Ballafairy, Cameron Highlanders, Citadel FC in Shore Street and Clachnacudden in Merkinch were joined the next day by Forest Mechanics and Ross County. And there have been changes, of course, over the years, but in the Highland Football League season of 2025-26, Forest Mechanics and Clachnacudden remain as the two founding members. But one of the things that brings back memories for a lot of people are the grounds that clubs have played in and the grounds that have been in the city over the last 140 years. And it's quite remarkable how many of them, how much has disappeared, how much the teams moved around. So Crown played at Kilcabook on the site that's now part of Inverness Golf Club, and they played at Dunlea. Thistle and Northern Counties played at Mulburn. Caledonian and Clachnacudden played at the Cars. Caledonian played at Telford Street. Clachnacudden and Citadel played at Shore Street. Union FC played next to down near by the canal, and Inverness Rovers played at Needlefield Park near Rose Street Bridge. So there's been quite an extraordinary amount of movement, and on top of that, many of the teams played at the Longman or also on ground loaned by farmers or by landowners and so on. And I am conscious that these names will be very familiar to locals and probably absolutely not to anyone out with Inverness. Now, as I say, it's often memories of going to the grounds and being at the pitches that prompt memories and discussions. Let's look at some of the specific Inverness Club histories as written up by the Inverness Caledonian Thistle Community Trust Chair, Gordon Fife. Caledonian FC were founded in 1885, taking their name from the nearby Caledonian Canal. And after some time at a pitch known as the Clay Pit, they purchased land at Telford Street in 1920. And they would play, after the Second World War, they played under a motto that they had adopted, Primus inter omnes, first over all. And some of their stats, as written down by Gordon Fife, kind of back up that claim. He says, no other Highland League club matched their silverware haul, with the side of the late 40s and early 50s led by ex-Ranger Bobby Bolt generally hailed as their best, though the 1982-83 team's feat of going undefeated through the 30-game championship is unequalled in modern times. The club won 23 and drew 7 of their games and received national recognition by being awarded the prestigious Rothmans Football Yearbook Award for being the outstanding non-league side in Scotland. One record, unlikely ever to be equalled, was the scoring of all 10 Cally goals by Andy Dupey Mitchell in a qualifying cup tie against Fraserburgh at Telford Street in September 1952. Dupey also played for Inverness Thistle, and while playing for them in 1956, scored no fewer than 77 league and cup goals. Later legends of the game were Alan Presley, who commuted from Aberdeen for 16 seasons in the 60s and 70s, missing only 4 games in his 650-game stint with the club. Only right back Roddy Davidson, a star of the 70s and 80s, played more times. The club's top all-time scorer was Donny Ginger Mackenzie with 425 goals, followed by Billy Urquhart with 401, who had 2 spells with Cally in the 70s and 80s. Billy Urquhart's goals and a great performance in the pre-season game against Rangers won him a move to Ibrox in 1978. And the club's most successful manager was Alex Main, who won 15 league and cup medals during his time at the helm. Cally, who played in Royal Blue, won their first title in 1895-96 and had accumulated 18 titles by the time of their merger with Inverness Thistle in 1994. Cally still play, as that extract denoted, albeit as part of Inverness Caledonian Thistle, and I'll come back to that. Another team still going strong in Inverness today is Clachnacudden FC. Clachnacudden, their name comes from the Gaelic for the stone of the tubs, the stone that the women used to beat their washing on the River Ness. Clach were formed in 1885 and quickly became a dominant force, winning 8 out of the 13 first titles in the Highland League, going on to win 4 successive titles, not once, but twice. Here's what Gordon Fife goes on to say about some of Clach's triumphs and some of the names most associated with the club. In 1921, they were the first club in the Highland League to build a grandstand, opened by Provost Donald MacDonald, a great supporter of the club, and in the mid-1930s, they became the first club to win the Scottish Qualifying Cup twice. But the team that will be forever remembered is the team that claimed a clean sweep of trophies in 1947-48. Indeed, a covered enclosure at Grant Street Park has been named the Clean Sweep Stand. Clach had to wait until 1975-76 for their next title, when manager Sandy Wallace inspired the Lilywhites to victory. By that time, the club had built a social club, which at its height was a great money spinner. By 1990, troubled times led to the club going into receivership, but happily a group of businessmen came to the rescue to form a new company, Clachnacudden 1990 Limited. Clach's last title success, their 18th, was in 2003 to 2004, when former player Robbie Williamson was manager. Down the years, one stalwart stands out. Ex-Chelsea centre-half George Rogers joined the club in 1932, and after one season went to the French club Nîmes. He was to return a year later to serve as player, coach, manager, director and chairman. Indeed, very much the grand old man of football until his death in 1982. Other legends were Ali Chisholm and Ernie Latham, who were granted a testimonial game against Rangers in 1972, along with Chick Allen of Caledonian. Players to make their mark and move to big clubs included Roddy McLean, Spurs, Jim Baxter and Roddy Munro, Rangers, George MacLeod, Luton Town, Donny Gillies, Bristol City, Dave Shearer, Middlesbrough and Duncan Shearer, Chelsea. So it's quite remarkable how these clubs have generated so many substantial and important dominant players, not only in Inverness but beyond. And 1885, as we've seen, is a key year for football in Inverness, because also formed that year were Inverness Thistle FC and Citadel FC. Citadel were part of the growth of football in the Highlands from its earliest days. Named for Oliver Cromwell's Citadel near their Shore Street home, they were founder members of the Highland League in 1893 and won their first trophy, the North of Scotland Cup, in 1900-1901, and they would lift it 7 times in total. In addition, they won the Highland League in 1908-1909, the Inverness Charity Cup 4 times, the Inverness Cup twice, and the Elginshire Charity Cup once. Citadel played in the Scottish Cup 6 times, had their best season in 1931-32, and in the final of the Scottish Qualifying Cup, defeated Murrayfield Amateurs 4-1 in a twice replayed final at Easter Road in Edinburgh. But troubles were on the way for the club. It was situated much further out of town than the others, and in 1935 Citadel resigned from the Highland League, and in 1937, after their 4th Inverness Charity Cup win, the club folded. Finally, I want to share Gordon Five's history of Inverness Thistle, and this is a team I'm sure that many will remember. 1885 is the year that Inverness Thistle were founded by a Dirribucht miller by the name of Mr. Smith, who had 4 sons who played for the club. The Black and Reds absorbed Crown FC in 1889 and Union FC in 1895-96, when they moved from the Milburn area to Kingsmills, which was known as the hub of the hill. When the Highland League was established in 1893, there were 7 teams competing, and Thistle won the historic first league title with 21 points from 12 games. Other teams taking part were Cally, Clach, Forest Mechanics, Union, Citadel and Cameron Highlanders. Thistle went on to win 8 titles, the last of which was won in 1986-87. A memorable achievement for the Jags was winning the Scottish Qualifying Cup in 1932-33, beating Pennycook 4-3 in the final at Elgin. Kingsmills Park was closed during World War II, and the playing area became a camp for Polish soldiers. One unfortunate side effect happened in May 1946, when some youths found an unexploded mortar bomb which went off as they were playing, causing a fatality and serious injury to 5 others. It was in February 1972 that Celtic came north to open the new Kingsmills floodlights, installed at a cost of £4,500. They sent up a strong side on the Monday night and won 5-0. At that time, Thistle were a scoring machine and rattled in 469 goals in 120 league games between 1969-73. Johnny Cowie and Ian Stephen were the deadly duo up front. A highlight was winning back-to-back league titles in 1971-72, ending a 36-year barren spell, and in 1972-73. In 1973-74, Thistle made an unsuccessful bid to join the Scottish League, losing out by only one vote to Ferranti Thistle. The club's most famous Scottish Cup win was a 3-0 home victory in 1985 over Kilmarnock, which won Thistle a money-spinning tie against Celtic at Parkhead in the last 16. At the time of their centenary in 1985, Jock MacDonald was the chairman. Jock also served for many years on the Scottish Football Association, and his contribution to football was recognised with the naming of the main stand at Caledonian Stadium in his name. Thistle's final game before the merger with Caledonian was in May 1994, a home game against Lossiemouth. Skipper that day was Dave Milroy, who played more than 900 games during a 22-year association with the club. Before I come on to the events that happened in the 1990s and that merger that I've alluded to several times, I want to quickly have a look at the women's game. I wanted to share this extract with you from a newspaper extract from 1938, which focuses on women's football in Inverness. It's entitled, "Is a Women's Tournament in the Offing?" With a women's football team in practically every town in the north of Scotland, the prospects of a cup competition for women for the area is not out with the realms of possibility. In fact, all that appears necessary to set such a tournament going seems to be the appearance of someone who would present a cup. Some charity or other would benefit from such a competition. Nairn Laundry Team gave Inverness the first glimpse of women's football on Wednesday night at Telford Street, where they drew 3-3 with Caledonian Ladies. Play was even in the early stages, but once the Caledonian Ladies took the lead through Elle McRae after 20 minutes, the home team had the best of matters till the interval. Nairn Ladies showed up better in the second half and M. Grant equalised. Elle McRae and Chrissy Mackenzie added goals for Caledonian Ladies, and Betty Hill and Iris Thompson equalised. Incidentally, we also have press cuttings from that same year, 1938, about the women's game in Caithness. Women's football was very, very popular and commonly played right across the UK in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and the first known women's match to be played under FA rules took place in Hibernian Park in Edinburgh in 1881, with Scotland taking a decisive 3-0 victory over England. Lily St Clair became the first ever recorded female goalscorer. The women's game grew and grew in popularity, especially during World War I, and drew crowds of thousands. But the end of World War I signalled a change. And I went onto the Scottish FA website to have a look and see how they described it. And this is how they have recorded what happened next in women's football. On the 2nd of March 1918, an unofficial match at Celtic Park drew an estimated crowd of 15,000 fans. But when the war ended on November the 11th of that year, dreams of continued success and official recognition of the game were increasingly eroded. The pioneers become outcasts. Playtime was over. Women were expected to immediately return to their families and jobs. This message was given imprimatur by the Scottish Football Association, who, despite commitments from several clubs backing the women's game, followed the spirit of restrictions placed on women's football by the English FA and banned members in the 1920s from advocating or even entertaining women's football. Through this, women continued to play. Teams such as Rutherglen Ladies and Edinburgh Ladies have now become legendary names in an era for which official records are scant. Rutherglen and Edinburgh were crowned Ladies World Champions during an interwar period of the 1920s and 1930s, beating English opposition to claim the title. In 1948, the Scottish Football Association enforced its approach to women's football by enacting a ban on women's football teams using the facilities and resources of SFA member football clubs and engaging the services of licensed officials. However, this did not stop women continuing to play, which they did throughout the decades. Information about this is currently limited but is being uncovered all the time. It wasn't until the 1970s, however, when the undeniable case for equal rights was growing in visibility and volume, that the situation began to change. The success of unsanctioned competitions namely the unofficial Women's World Cups in 1970 and 71, highlighted the interest and the potential in the game. UEFA then held a vote in 1971 to bring unofficial women's organisations under the banners of their respective national associations. The vote was passed 13-1 in favour. Only one single country, Scotland, voted against. Despite this, or maybe because of this, the Scottish Women's Football Association was founded in 1972, and in 1974 the SFA finally relented and recognised women's football to some extent, but it wasn't until 1998 that the SFA agreed to the affiliation of the Scottish Women's Football Association and became involved in the management of the women's game, taking over charge of the international side and establishing development centres to support female players. And finally, in 2002, the Scottish Women's Premier League was established. So we can see from that newspaper clip that what's happening in Inverness and in the local area is echoing what's happening nationally. There's interest in the game. There's that newspaper article described the fact that almost every town in the north has a women's side in the 30s. So I finished there by saying that it was the 1990s really that started to change things in women's football, that the SFA agreed to the affiliation of the SWFA. And the 1990s were transformative for football in Inverness generally. That same decade saw not only the change in the women's game, but a huge transformation in football in Inverness with the creation of Inverness Caledonian Thistle, the result of the SFL deciding that they would add 2 more teams. They currently had 38 and they were going up to 40 teams, so there was space. The merger between Caledonian FC and Inverness Thistle FC was controversial. Both clubs had loyal fan bases who feared the loss of identity that would come from a merger or could come from a merger, and there was a century-old rivalry between the two teams as well. Clachnacudden, who had also considered being part of that merger, pulled out. And the merger required the support of both clubs' fans, and despite protests and opposition, the merger went ahead by a narrow vote of 54% to 46%. And I'll turn back to Gordon Fife's history of Inverness Caledonian Thistle to tell the story of what happened. In February 1994, a new club was formed in Inverness when Caledonian and Inverness Thistle amalgamated after a successful bid was made for the new club to join the Scottish Football League. Together with Ross County, Caledonian Thistle FC were admitted into the Scottish Division 3 in 1994-95. The historic first league game took place on August 13th, 1994, resulting in a 5-2 home victory over Arbroath, with skipper Alan Hercher notching a quick-fire hat-trick. In 1996, the club changed its name to Inverness Caledonian Thistle, a condition of gaining major funding from the local council towards the cost of building Caledonian Stadium on reclaimed land at the Longman. Under manager Steve Patterson, promotion to Division 2 was achieved in 1996-97, and promotion to Division 1 followed in 1998-99. One of the headlines of the club's short history occurred on a snowy night in February 2000, when Cali pulled off one of the shocks of the Scottish Cup by beating Celtic 3-1 at Celtic Park, leading to, of course, the famous Sun headline, "Super Cali go ballistic, Celtic are atrocious." Initially, Inverness Caledonian Thistle had to play their Premier League home games at Pittodrie, Aberdeen Stadium, but by the turn of the new year in 2005, 2 new stands had been built behind the goals to meet the SPFL seating regulations of 6,000. Relegation came in 2008-2009, but the club bounced back within 1 season. In 2013-14, it reached its first national final, the Scottish League Cup, meeting Aberdeen at Celtic Park. Inverness lost a penalty shootout after the game ended 0-0 after extra time. This disappointment was set aside the next season when, remarkably, Inverness Caledonian Thistle lifted the Scottish Cup with a 2-1 win over Falkirk at Hampden. An extra time 3-2 win over Celtic in the semi-final set up a memorable day out for the Inverness Caledonian Thistle faithful. Manager John Hughes was centre stage as the trophy was paraded through the streets of the city the next day. Victory meant qualification for Europe and a trip to Romania for the first round of the Europa League. The outcome was a 1-0 aggregate defeat to Astra Giurgiu, but those who made the trip to Romania will long remember the experience. The player who has played most games for the club is back right Ross Tockley with 589 games. Dennis Wyness is all-time top scorer with 101 goals in 243 games. So, Inverness has had a long and dramatic history with the beautiful game. It's quite amazing to think that all of those 30 teams and then various teams starting up and closing down and merging and being relegated and winning cups, and it's been a tumultuous but long and involved and beloved story for many people. And I wanted to come back and finish to Jamie from Ambala and his first I want to give him the final words about what this Football Memories project has meant, what the people's lifelong passion and connection to football, what that's meant for the Football Memories project. So Jamie says, many hundreds of photographs have been digitised, some from archival collections, but many from the scrapbooks and private collections of supporters, former players and others involved in the game. The project now includes oral histories and interviews which capture the memories of former players, officials and supporters. Donations and loans of football memorabilia, such as medals, trophies, old kits and local football artefacts, have been plentiful, and many of these have featured in well-attended exhibitions at the Highland Archive Service. One notable donation was the 1922 Inverness Cup medal won by Clachnacudden's Roddy Mackenzie, who later played for Newcastle United. The project has also uncovered previously forgotten stories, such as the new floodlights installed by Cali in 1933, being dismantled after only a couple of games to be relocated on the shores of Loch Ness because a huge reward was being offered for the capture of Nessie. The Ambala website has become the project's digital home and hosts much of the aforementioned content, photographs and film clips of historic matches and figures, audio interviews, oral histories, newspaper clippings and memorabilia, as well as a Can You Help section where people can help identify teams and players in historic images. This crowdsourced approach means that the archive is continually being enriched by community knowledge. A richly illustrated book was published in late 2023 entitled Inverness Football Remembers. It traces local football's journey from the 19th century clubs like Crown, Union and Rovers through to the achievements of Inverness Caledonian Thistle in the modern era. In conclusion, Jamie says, the reminiscence sessions have proven especially beneficial, particularly for older participants, and they are more than nostalgic get-togethers. They help combat isolation and bring therapeutic value, especially for those living with memory loss. By collating material across clubs and across eras, this project fills gaps in the story of football in Inverness, making sure that they will still be told in the future. By capturing these stories now, before they're lost, Inverness Football Memories is doing more than preserving history. It's nurturing the community's sense of itself. In that sense, the project is as much about the present as it is about the past, and is about making sure future generations understand the role that football has played and still plays in the life of Inverness. With millions of views online and a growing collection of memories, the Inverness Football Memories project continues to do something both simple and powerful, collecting and sharing the footballing heritage of Inverness. So I think I got goosebumps reading that, and I know about the project. So please do go and check out the Football Memories on Ambala. Have a look at all of those photos, all of those memories, recollections, relationships that were started, jobs that were obtained, all through football as the conduit. Please do go and have a look. And I know that similar projects are being run elsewhere. There's one in Caithness as well. So if it's something that's of interest to you, go and see if there is one nearby you. So thank you so much for joining me for this week. I hope I have done justice to the football fans out there. Next week will be pre-recorded as well. We'll be looking at more evidence from the Dewar Committee, one of my favourite subjects. It's such an interesting topic. So I hope you can join me for next week's episode. But in the meantime, a reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series. But if you're able to donate towards our work and to support us in running projects like Football Memories, then we're very, very grateful for that. Thank you.